Welcome once again to the Tin Dog Podcast, and before I begin this second of the 3 Torchwood doubles, I just need to say something about what I said last time. You see, I've had a few emails from people saying that I said that Nerys Hughes was in Sharda, and of course what I really meant was she was in Kinder. Sharda was the unfinished Douglas Adams script that bears a remarkable resemblance to Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, whereas Sharda is just a lovely Peter Davison story. Sorry about that, it is proof that I am of course only human. In other news, we have been told that the new series, that's Series 4 or Season 30, or is it Series 30 and Season 4, of Doctor Who, starts on the 5th of April 2008. That's literally weeks away. Or indeed, by the time you hear this, possibly 1 week. The countdown has begun. I'm very, very excited. But enough of the future, let's talk about Torchwood. The first episode we'll be discussing is episode 2.10. This is the P.G. Hammond story, the one set in the cinema. Now, obviously, people are aware that I'm a big P.G. Hammond fan. Sapphire and Steel is one of my all-time favourite shows, and if you haven't seen Sapphire and Steel, I suggest you track down some DVDs and give them a go. And I'll admit straight off that this is the episode I was really, really looking forward to seeing. My favourite Sapphire and Steel story concerns people who live in photographs, who leave the photographs and suck people into them. It's very disturbing. There's a man without a face who looks a bit like a Magritte painting, and it's one of those things I saw as a child that years later, while walking through the streets of Amsterdam, oddly enough, I suddenly froze and went, oh, if the guy without a face from Sapphire and Steel can steal people's images and she's avoiding having a photograph taken so he can never get her, will it affect video? And I kind of froze, and it gave me nightmares, and it's power of the writing from those stories that has allowed it to stay with me all these years. Now obviously I'm aware that it is fiction, yes, I know it's not real, but it doesn't stop such ideas getting into your head, and that's why I was so looking forward to this episode. Creatures that live inside old film, coming back to life for their nefarious purposes, and for me, that's where this story kind of falls apart a bit. It's best summed up in the idea of over-wrecking the pudding. You see, you've got your creatures, your strange creatures from inside the film, odd thing number 1. You've got the fact that they're after moisture, which I'm not quite sure if that's anything other than a reference to an American comedian's gag about why women are on Earth, because according to the commercials, all they actually seek is extra moisture, and they must have it or they will age and wither. I'm not quite sure that's true. And then you had the added oddness of Jack appearing in the old films. I think it would have been odder or even nicer if an alternative evil Jack that lived inside the old films could have come through, or if Jack had been the one who originally imprisoned them in the films. But these things just weren't examined, and the idea of filming them and trapping them back on film, rather than say on videotape, but that would of course be too much like the way the Doctor defeated the Wire in Season 2 of the new Doctor Who series, so perhaps that was it. It was a collection of some wonderfully good ideas. I just felt disappointed because I knew that Hammond can write so much better. But perhaps there were restrictions that I'm just unaware of. It did look great. I wasn't overly struck on the 1920s mermaid diver woman, but the performances were good enough. I didn't quite understand why they needed an audience, or what they were doing with them, or what the last breath business was about. But hey, it was nicely disturbing. The following episode, however, has gone down remarkably well. This is episode 2.11. Now, if we were obeying the way that Friends episodes used to be named, the last one would be The One with the Old Cinema, and this episode would be called The One with the Island, which kind of shortchanges things, because it is one of the best acted pieces of Torchwood I've seen in some time. It was a compact story, it dealt with the nature of the rift, and it also gave you questions about Jack's motivations and character. The central performance of the mother who'd lost her son from Mafanwe Onige in the Village from Little Britain was superb. And I've got no issues with that at all. To be honest, I've got no issues with any of the performances. Some of the things like the scream because he saw the heart of a son smacked a little bit too much of Event Horizon, which, let's face it, isn't anybody's favourite film. Unfortunately for me, the island where everyone seems to live is just a little bit more familiar to me. Because when I stayed in Wales last year, I happened to catch an episode of their soap opera, Poblicum. Now, as a non-native Welsh person, in fact, I don't like using the word tourist, but I couldn't quite understand what was happening, because I just don't speak the language, but the location, the island, and the lighthouse all seemed remarkably familiar from this episode of Probably Come I Saw Myself, and I just couldn't quite take that aspect very seriously. I loved the way that Gwen had no idea about GPS, but she understands a lot of Torchwood's alien technology. To me, that was a very nice touch. And of course, the main concept behind the whole thing is be careful what you wish for. This woman wanted her son back, and then she had the chance of having him back. And for me, the best way to end this episode would have been for Gwen to give her back the one thing she really wanted, which wasn't her son, but was hope. And she could have done that by giving her retcon and making it feel to her as though she hadn't found him, and that there was still hope, and she could go on. No episode like this was going to end well. And that, I think, is what Torchwood needs to focus on in the future. There'll be one more double episode of this, and then it's time for the big game. Season 4, 13 episodes of unadulterated loveliness, I hope. Be seeing you. You have been listening to the Tin Dog Podcast. Doctor Who and its associated shows are all trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. Contact us at tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk.